We're on Chaf Aleph. Today's daf is Chaf Beis, but we're holding Chaf Aleph on Mid Beis. We're holding on Chaf Aleph. We're on 21-2. I'm guessing A. Maybe
21B1, you mean?
21B1 or 2, I'm guessing. 2 dots. The words are Iboyalu. Okay?
Yeah. 21B1.
All right. Let's keep the questions to super on point. Let's try to cover a little ground.
On or not?
Relevant. Not on. Okay, no. Weiter. Iboyalahu. Ask the Gemara the following question. We have been discussing Shniyos. Shniyos were institutions made by the rabbis of relationships that technically are not an erva. They're not listed in the Torah, but they sound and smell and walk like an erva. So the rabbis decided to treat it in a similar fashion to create like an erva d'Rabbanan, let's say. So Iboyalu, they asked the following question. Eishes achi ha'em min ha'em mahu. Let's do this slowly. Okay. Eishes achi ha'em. So this is my mother's brother, and it's my mother's brother from her mother. Okay. It's her maternal brother's wife. This is a fancy way of saying my aunt. My mother's maternal brother. So they're not brother and sister from the father. They're brother and sister from the mother. His wife, my aunt.
My mother's brother, you said.
My mother's brother could also mean from her father. So meaning my mother's brother from her mother, or my mother's brother from her father, right? Yeah.
Because it could be separate.
Because they could be, yeah, exactly. So now, what's the halacha by such a person? Now, let's just clarify. My mother's brother from her father, his wife, and my father's brother from his mother are both not an erva. Those are midirabanan. Those are shnios. Why? Because there is one erva called my father's brother's wife.
Right.
My father's brother's wife is in the Torah. My father's brother from his father, so that's my aunt. There is an aunt that is an erva. So that means you can go to a Pesach Seder and you hug one aunt and you're touching an erva, and you hug the other aunt, you're touching a d'Rabbanan, and ask the Gemara, what about the fourth aunt? Meaning, I have my mother's brother from her mother. So now I have no part of this relationship that is related to my father whatsoever, or to anyone's father. There's no av at all in this relationship. It's my mother's brother from her mother. So it's my mother and her mother creating this woman. Mm-hmm. So is this already considered too far that the rabbi said this isn't even remotely close to the scenario we're concerned for, which is my father's brother's wife? What's the case of my father's brother's wife? It's my father and his brother from his father. So that's all coming through the father. So now we have it going completely through the mother. Do we say that this is considered an erva? Ask the Gemara.
It's always patriarch. It's on the father's side.
It depends on the erva. It depends on the erva. This erva we're coming to address is an erva that comes through my father's brothers through his father's wife. Right. But if I'd have an erva through my mother, like my sister from my mother, right? Let's just say that's all through my mom. Right. So it could be the shnios that are created off of that would all go through the mom. Okay. So Yiboyalu, ask the Gemara the question. Eishes achi ha'em, my mother's brother from her mother, min ha'em, his wife. Right? So my aunt, Mahu. And ask the Gemara spells out its question. Eishes achi ha'av min ha'em, my father's maternal brother, right? Ve'eshes achi ha'em min ha'av, and the wife of my mother's paternal brother. Yeah. Both of those are shnios, like we just explained. And why are they shnios? The ikatzad av, because each one of them have at least a part of the chain that is paternal, either my father or my mother's father, right? Who de Rabbanan? Why? Because it has some similarity to the erva, which is entirely through the paternal side. But if something does not have at all a paternal side, like my mother's maternal brother's wife, then Rabban, and the rabbis didn't make Xera because there's no similarity. Odilma Loshna, meaning my aunt is my aunt is my aunt, and maybe in the end of the day they said people aren't going to be stopping and looking at her and saying, wait 1 second, are you from the maternal? From the maternal? They're just going to say an aunt is an aunt is an aunt, and therefore an aunt is an aunt is also. That's the question of the Gemara. Rav Safra says, he guf Xera. You're telling me that to begin with, you're going to say that this aunt, who is only your mother's maternal brother's wife, you're going to make a Xera from her. Why? Because she's similar to the two cases which themselves are only the Rabbanan. And you're going to create a Xera on top of that. Now, we have a general rule. The general rule is we don't make Xera. What is a Xera? It's the rabbis say, listen, when the Torah says something's usher, we're going to make a fence around that. And now we're going to come around and make another fence around our fence. That we don't do. There's one fence, we make a fence around that. We don't make a fence around anything else. So it says the Gemara, I thought I wrote this stuff down. And he did. Here we are. Okay. Says the Gemara like this. What kind of question is this for Safar? Safar's bothered by Gzeru, Amar Rava, Atu Kulu Lav Gzeru Gzeru. No, what are we talking about over here? The entire discussion of Shniyos is a Gzeru situation, and we go through a couple of examples. What are the couple of examples? We're going to go through two or three examples. Imai, my mother is Mamish and Erva, the woman who birthed me. Yeah, she's an Erva. That's Menat Torah. That's a Karetz. That's in the Torah. So Aim Imai, one of the Shniyos we mentioned is your mother's mother, your grandmother, right? That's a Shniya. That's not in the Torah, but Aim Imai is a Shniya. The Gazru al Aim Aviv, and since my mother's mother is a problem, they said, well, my mother's mother's my grandma, so my father's mother's my grandma, even though my father's mother has nothing to do with my mother. What does she have to do with my mother? Nothing. It's completely the other side of the family. So you see, it's Gzeira L'Gzeira. Right? Mishum Ein Imai. They made a problem with my father's mother because of my mother's mother. My mother's mother is only us the Rabbanan. So it's Gzeira L'Gzeira, says Rava. V'taima mai, why? Kulu debei Ema Rabasi Karla, because the argument is in the end of the day, it's your grandma. If it's your grandma, so you know what? Grandmas look like this grandma, the grandmas look like that grandma. They all wear the same dichels, they look the same. They're all the same. So you see, it's Gzeira L'Gzeira, and yet we have no problem saying it. Another example. Eishes Aviv Erva, my father's wife. So not my mom. My father has the second wife, or my father got remarried to another lady. This woman is an Erva to me. Can't be with her. What about my father's wife? So this is my grandfather's wife. So Eishes Avi Aviv Shnia. We said that's an Issa D'Rabbanan. It looks a lot like your father's wife. If I think my father's wife's okay, you might come to think your father's wife's okay. Says the Gemara, it's a Shnia. And yet, my father's wife's a Shnia, V'gazru al Eishes Avi Imai. My mother's father's wife. They went ahead, right? They jumped across the family side from my father's side to my mother's side and said the equivalent's going to be usher. Why? Because she's very similar. Your grandmother on this side is like your grandfather's wife on this side is a lot like your grandfather's wife on that side, even though the grandfather on my maternal side has nothing to do with the whole reason why the thing started, right? Mishum Eishes Avi Aviv. So time of because again, same svara. Kulu debe Abba, Rabba Karle. These are all your grandparents. These are your grandfather's wives. Third example, and this is really the example that we're talking about in our case. Eishes Achi Ha'av, Min Ha'av Erva. My father's brother's wife, meaning my father's paternal brother's wife. That's in the Torah. The Torah says you cannot sleep with your aunt, who is the wife of your father's paternal brother. So Eishes Achi Ha'av Min Ha'em Shnia. So because of that, we said that your father's brother's wife, who is your father's maternal brother's wife, she's a Shnia, right? And V'gazru al Eishes Achi Ha'em Min Ha'av, and we then jump to your mother's side to say, if your mother's paternal brother's wife is also going to be like that. You got something to say for the group?
No, I was. I'm not. I don't know.
Otherwise, it's a distraction.
But this picture.
No. We're good. No. Now you're just breaking our chain of thoughts. Yeah. It's not helpful. Yeah.
I didn't say anything.
Okay. Doesn't help. Okay. Again, my chain of thought is broken. So, Eishes Achia Av Min Ha'av. I'm sorry, I have to start again. Eishes Achia Av Min Ha'av Erva. Your father's paternal brother, his wife is an Erva. That's in the Torah. Eishes Achia Av Min Ha'em. Your father's maternal brother's wife is a Shnia. Right. So if that's usher, we also said that your mother's V'gazru al Eishes Achia Ha'em Min Ha'av, your mother's paternal brother's wife. So now you're asking what? We're asking about your mother's maternal brother's wife. So says the Gemara, if the whole thing is Mishum Eishes Achia Ha'av Min Ha'em, the time of my Mishum the Kulu debei Doidi Karlu, these are all your uncle's wives. Right? So what's the difference between this uncle's wife who's an Ereva, this uncle's wife who's a Shnia, and this uncle's wife who is just even farther away? So says the Gemara, you're right. You've just pointed out that we have no problem saying Zera L'Gzera, but okay, at the end of the day, we're still asking a question. My example goes a little bit farther than all your other examples because my example has no tzad of the father in me at all. This is my mother's maternal brother's wife. What's the halacha? So Tashma, let's look at a brisa to see if maybe perhaps from the brisa we can answer the question. Rav Yehuda bar Shila came from Eretz Yisrael. Amar, he said, Amri b'merava, they say in Eretz Yisrael the following cryptic statement. Kol shebenekeva ereva v'zachar gazru al ishtay mishum shnia. Simple read is, any woman who, if she's a woman at her level, is an erva, if I swapped her out for a man, his wife would be a shnia. Meaning, if my sister, I'll use an example, if my aunt is an erva, So then my uncle's wife would be a shnia. Just trying to use an example, even though uncle's wife in certain scenarios, right? So if my aunt, that's the classic example. If my mother's sister, my mother's sister is a problem. So if that's true, then my mother's brother's wife is going to be a problem as a shnia. That's just the model. Yeah, that was the statement of Rav Yehuda Bar Shila, says the Gemara, and therefore the Gemara is attempting to use that to say, and therefore, so too this person should be usher. Why? Because what are we saying? We're talking about your mother's maternal brother's wife. This would be the version of the wife of the person that would be the equivalent of your mother's maternal sister. Well, your mother's maternal sister is certainly an erva. That's written in the Torah. So
Uncle Herbie's wife.
My Uncle Herbie's wife. Yes, correct. Yeah, right, exactly. Right. So your mother's maternal brother's wife is the same thing, according to what we just said, as your mother's maternal sister. Your mother's maternal sister is mamish and erva in the Torah, so certainly this should be a shnia. The Gemara says, 1 second. You're telling me this rule applies all across the board. I'm going to go find you a couple of problems. The klolahu, this is a rule. Chamoso erva, your mother-in-law, right? Your wife's mother. Your mother-in-law is an erva. Eishes chamav muteris. But we swap your mother-in-law out for your father-in-law and talk about his wife, who's not the mother of your wife. Let's say it's his second wife. She's mother to you. You can marry your father-in-law's wife as long as she's not your mother-in-law's mother. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not even a shnia. So clearly, that's one problem with this statement. Number two, bas chamoso. What's chamoso? Your father-in-law. The daughter of your father-in-law. Again. Oh, chamoso. Oh, sorry, my bad. I thought it said chamo. Bas chamoso. The daughter of your mother-in-law. So let's work it out. You're married to a lady. Her mother is chamoso. Her mother is your mother-in-law. If her mother-in-law has a child from a different marriage, so obviously not the daughter of, right? So
not her daughter.
Correct. Right. Not she has she has a daughter. That's an erva.
The husband's daughter?
Not necessarily, just the mother's daughter. So let's say my mother-in-law was married previously, has a daughter from that previous marriage, let's say, and that woman to me is an erva. That's my wife's sister.
Still your wife's sister.
Of course, through the mother.
From her mother.
Not really, even if she has it afterwards, but it's easier to understand. That's mamish and erva. So says the Gemara. Yeah. Let me swap out my mother-in-law for my father-in-law now. Eishes ben Cham. No, sorry. Let me swap out the daughter for a son. Eishes ben Chamoso muteris. What if that same lady, my mother-in-law, has a previous marriage where she produced a son? That son's wife is completely mutter to me once they're divorced. So you see clearly that rule of erva becoming a shnia when you swap out the woman for the man's wife does not necessarily always work. One more example. Bas chamav erva. My father-in-law's daughter. It's really the same case that we just saw. It's my father-in-law's daughter from a previous marriage who is my wife's sister. That is an erva, right? Bas chamav erva. Eishes ben chamav. But let's say my father-in-law had a son from a previous marriage. His wife, let's say after his son, her husband divorces her or dies or whatever it is completely mutaris. One more, sorry, my bad. Or maybe two more. Yeah, two more. Chorgaso. We haven't seen this word too much yet. Chorgaso is a stepdaughter. A stepdaughter, remember, that would be my wife's child from a previous marriage. Okay? So my stepdaughter is an erva. That's bas ishtay. Bas ishtay is an erva in the Torah. Yeah? What happens if my wife doesn't have a daughter, but she has a son that she brings in? So that would be my stepson. My stepson's wife is mutter. Eishes charga muteris. My stepson's wife is okay. Bas chargaso, the daughter of my wife's stepdaughter, has a daughter. That's an erva. That's my wife's daughter's daughter. That's bas bita. That's in the Mishnah. We have one of the 15. It says you can't be with bas ishtai or bas bita, the daughter of her daughter. That's an erva. So that means my wife's granddaughter is an erva to me. But my wife's grandson's wife is mutter. Eishes ben chargo muteris. So all of these examples are clearly showing that this statement can't be true all the time. So how can you use it to answer our question that my mother's maternal brother's wife should be a problem? Maybe we'll say that just because my mother's maternal sister is an erva, that doesn't necessarily mean that my mother's maternal brother's wife is a shnia, because you have cases where that's not the case, says the Gemara. So fine. The Hadar of Yehuda Bar Shila, Lasu Yemai. Okay, then what is it coming to include then, if not these cases you just brought? Says the Gemara. Maybe it's coming to include our case exactly. You just proved to me a million cases where it doesn't work. Yet he said the statement. Perhaps he was referring to our case. Our case of your mother's maternal brother's wife. The kolshin mekeva erva bezacha gazur ishta mishum shniya. Right? So that's the Gemara's attempt.
Hopefully.
Right? Gemara's trying to say that would be the reason why it's usher, and I'll just tell you in the Maskana, we hold this. This is how we come out. So that's the Gemara. If that's the case, my shna, honey, why were all of those other ones we just listed? There was an erva that we didn't turn the other one into a shniya when we flipped the wife, the lady around for a man, and then talked about his wife. Umay shnaha, the case of uncle's wife that we just discussed, your mother's maternal brother's wife. Why in that case would you say that the erva when flipped becomes a shniya, whereas in the other case is not? So he says, your mother's maternal brother's wife. It's a mouthful, yeah? Bechad kiddushin mikarav lo. How do you get to your mother's maternal brother's wife? All you need is one marriage. Your mother, she birthed you. Your mother's brother, her mother birthed them. It's only that guy, it has to get married once to create the erva for you. So it's only one marriage to get to him. All of the other cases we talked about, chamav, chamoso, chamgaso, all of those cases, you start with a marriage, meaning it's my mother-in-law. That means I married a lady. One marriage. Now she has to have a kid who has so that's already two marriages, says the Gemara. Ad the ikatrei kiddushin loy mekarev. That's already considered too far.
Like we say, two degrees of separation.
Yeah, exactly. Second.
Earlier in the Gemara, when you asked about Zera, why don't we just say that any time that there's a Shia, they said that equal distance of relation doesn't matter what side.
So at least
it's not a Shia.
So within Shnios, that's I think that's effectively what they are saying. It's they're basically saying. See, without getting too far into that conversation, because it's a larger Shas conversation, but when we talk about Gezeras, sometimes the rabbis had a very specific thing they were trying to address, like this scenario.
Right.
And therefore, they only made the Gezerah there.
Correct.
And if you're concerned about that, making another Gezerah would be a problem, because that's already too far away. But sometimes they had a concern that was more general.
But here it sounded general that if
well, that's what I'm saying. And that's why it wouldn't be Gzeira L'Gzeira. Meaning it's because it's a more general concern. What was their real concern? This specific woman? No. The concern was the erva. The erva is their main concern. All of these other cases are just different ways of looking like that.
The erva is Minotaura. It's the Shia that's the closest the relation. It looks like an erva.
Right.
But it doesn't matter if you go right or left. It's the same.
Right. I mean, that's the reason why. Meaning, in the end of the day, and that's why in my head, the way I think of it is, when I go to Pesach Seder and I see my aunts, I don't start putting them in categories. Well, that's my maternal. They're all my aunts. It happens to be one of them might be an erva, and one of them might be completely mutter according to this, right? But to me, they're my aunts. So if I would have go to the next table over and say, "Hey, happy Pesach," and I see one guy goes and kisses his aunt, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you can kiss your aunt?" I was like, "Yeah, that's not my." It changes the entire thing, because in my mind, an aunt is an aunt is an aunt is an aunt.
So I want to tell us the math. So you are aunts that you can.
No. You can't. You can't kiss your aunt.
Okay.
Ants are definitely a problem. But
Candace will kiss Matthew, and it's fine.
Yeah, whatever.
Right.
I'm not telling anyone what to do.
Right.
This is not halacha l'maisa. This is the Rav Chashmaitz. I'll leave with the whatever. Okay. Says the Gemara Vayta. Story, not a story, but another question. Shalach le'Rav Mishashe metusnia le'Rav Pepi. Mishashe metusnia is sent to Rav Pepi the following: Yilmadeinu Rabbeinu, Rabbi, please teach us the following halacha. Eishes achi avi ha'av. Right. So again, this is my father's brother. Okay, my father's brother.
Whoa. Yeah.
My father's brother's wife, that's an erva.
Right.
Father's brother's wife's an erva. What about my father's brother's wife? So the exact same relationship in a horizontal sense, one vertical level up. Yeah? So my father's brother's wife. Father's brother's wife's an erva, father's brother's wife mahu. That's the question. Another example that's a question is the achos aviha of mahu, my father's sister. So my father's sister, that's nothing to talk about. That's an erva. Nothing to talk about. My father's sister is an erva. What?
One generation.
Yeah. What if I'm one step up, mahu? Midelamata erva lamala nami gazerbe. Do we say that since it's only one generation up, therefore, and it's a generation up from an actual erva, we made a gzera of shniyos? Odilma, no. Ha is palag darta. It's too far away. One generation up already. It's a very distant relationship, and therefore we're not going to include it in the shniyos. We're trying to figure out what the answer is. Tashma, let's bring a brisa. This is our brisa from earlier. What did the brisa say? The brisa said mahin shniyos, and it listed off a bunch of shniyos. It had 8 of them. The loka chashiv lahu b'hadayu, and it didn't list these 2 amongst it. Let us learn from there that must be that they're not considered shniyos. The Gemara says, what do you mean? No, ton of a shire. Ton of a shire is an idea that we sometimes leave stuff out, and we leave stuff out Now, the only way you could say it's being left out is if there are other things that are left out. Ask the Gemara, Ma Shiur da Hai Shiur. What are the other ones? Now, I don't understand. Why can't you say you just listed two? Why can't you say one was left out for the other? These are the two. I don't know. Okay, maybe they're very similar.
It's a category.
Yeah, it's a category of one generation up. Says the Gemara, Ma Shiur da Hai Shiur. Shiur Shniyos de Bei Rabbi Chia, because there's an entire list of Shniyos that belong to the Amayr Rabbi Chia, which we're going to get to now. In which case, then those were left out. So these two were left out. So therefore, we're left with saying that they would be considered shniyos. Says the Gemara, Ameimar, meaning we wouldn't have a proof that they are shniyos. We don't have proof that they're not shniyos. Ameimar ekasher be'eshes achi avia aviv uve'achos avia aviv. These two cases of father's brother's wife and father's sister, right? He said they're kosher. They're not considered an arayas or a shniyah, sorry, and therefore they'd be mutter. Amalei Rav Hillel Ravashi. Lididi Chazili Shniyas Marbre de Ravana. I saw like a notebook, let's say, that belonged to Marbre de Ravana, where he had inside there the list of Shniyas. And it listed the Shniyas as follows: of the Ksivan Shitzari Liisuri, he had a list of 16. My love, let's figure out where. Well, apparently it didn't list what the Shniyas were. It just said that there are 16 Shniyas. And we're trying to figure out what are the 16. So my love, Tamani de Masnisa, the 8 of our Mishnah, which we already mentioned, right? We had 2 for sons, the sons and the daughters, and then we had the chamoso ones. It came to 8. Vishis de Bei Rabbi Chia, the 6, which we haven't learned yet of Rabbi Chia, that gets us to 14. So where are the other ones coming from? My love, that the other ones, V'hanach Tarti, these 2 that we just discussed. So says the Gemara, maybe from the fact that he found a list of 16, and we can only figure out 14 of them. The 2 remaining ones that are missing are the 2 that we're just asking about: your father's brother's wife and your father's sister. Hashitzari, that gets you to 16. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Ula taimech, according to you, that you're trying to just willy-nilly fill in the gap on these 2 with these 2 other ones. Shivsari havin, really it should be 17, because why? Didn't we have the case that we started the Gemara with? The ha'ika eshes achio emin oem, right? Your mother's maternal brother's wife, which we said before, right? The Pashtin and Isura, we said that's also going to be included because in the end of the day, she's your aunt is your aunt. In which case, then you have 17. So the list that you found that had 16 is anyways wrong. So we don't really have a solution to know which one fits and which one doesn't. So this is halakasha. That's not shver. Why? Because I can tell you the following. Hanach tarti, the last 2 we mentioned, father's brother's wife and father's sister. The Damyan Lahadadi, they're all the same, really, like you were saying before, because it's really just, they're the same in the sense that they were just one level up. That counts for 1 of the 16, or 1 of the 2 remaining spots. Veha Shitzari, in which case then the one that we started the Gemara with would be number 16, and now we have 16, in which case then we'd have a raya that all of these are going to be usher. Says the Gemara, V'hami kol makam l'didi chazyalan dechsiva li'isura. So, I mean, what's the question? The question is, you see, 16 of them are going to be usher. So how could a Maimer have said that these 2 are going to be mutter? So says the Gemara, no, 1 second. So fine, you figured out how you can get all 16 to say that the Shniyos should be usher. However, you have a cause of the heter. Let's say I would have told you, you asked the question if it's mutter or usher. Let's say I would have said to you, I found a list that would have said 14, right? Would you have relied upon the fact that someone found a piece of paper somewhere in someone's house that said there's only 14? No, you wouldn't have said, okay, therefore a Shniyos is going to be mutter. Why? Did he notarize it? Did he give it like some sort of a stamp of approval? You found a piece of paper in his house that said 16, right? So Hashtanami, the Kasav Yisura, Lav Marbre the Ravana Chasam Alai, we didn't sign it, and therefore it's not reliable, and so therefore we can't use it as a raya. So really, although we came out Lamaskana that your mother's maternal brother's wife would be usher, could be these 2 cases over here. Are not so clear. Either way, that's the Gemara in terms of Shniyos of our Mishnah. Says the Gemara, we mentioned earlier, the Brisa of Reb Chia, that he has an additional 6 Shniyos. So let's just quickly go through them. Well, we'll go through them as quickly as we can. Tani Debe Reb Chia. Reb Chia taught the following halacha as it pertains to Shniyos. Shlishi shebebnoi ushebebitoi ushebeben ishtoi ushebebas ishtoi. Let's pause for a second. These are all Shniyah, meaning he adds some Shniyos here. We're talking here about Shlishi, meaning the 3rd generation down on your son and 3rd generation down on your daughter. Let's just work it out.
I was supposed to go amazing chart.
Yeah, I looked at it. It's not bad. It's very helpful. It doesn't hurt to take a look at it while I'm talking. Yeah. So you have your sons, right? So your son is 1 generation down. right? The next one down is 2. Your son's. So now your son's wife is an erva. Your son's. Let's start with daughter. It's a little bit easier. Your daughter is an erva. Your daughter's daughter is an erva. Your daughter's daughter is a shnia. So third generation down on your daughter's side, and third generation down on your son's side, son's wife.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
That is all going to be a problem. So your son's daughter and your daughter's daughter. That's clear.
Those are shnias, right?
Shnias. Rabbinical, yes, correct. Now that also includes the Gemara doesn't say it, and Rashi sort of doesn't speak it out so good, but the Rishonim explain, Mefarshim explain. We mean to say, really, although the Gemara called it 6 of Rabbi Chia, 6 of Rabbi Chia is not really true. It's more than that, because each one of these is 4.
8
right?
according to this.
Yeah, exactly. Meaning each one of these is 4, which means it's 8, right? Meaning to say it's your son's daughter, your son's daughter's daughter, your daughter's son's daughter, and your daughter's daughter, right? Meaning
So
all
what does that
4
mean
of them.
then? If it's 8, the Gemara's making a mistake.
Yeah, it's categories probably, right? It could be categories, meaning everything comes from your son, everything comes from your daughter. Although you're right, I mean, it's not super consistent because you could probably find ways to split up other categories, but either way. So that is the first statement. These are 2 categories. Everything that comes through your son and your daughter from you. We'll see, not in the Gemara, but just let's make it clear. We're clearly talking here, these are not your wife's kids. Because if these were your wife's kids, they'd be covered under the Bas Ishtai and the Ben Ishtai and all that, right?
It's very similar, by the way. It looks like
it's exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
except the only difference is with yours, it will say it came from an let's say like a mistress or an anusa, whereas your wife's kids are from marriage. That's the only difference.
I got
only
it.
difference. So says the Gemara. So those are really we just got from he mentioned what did he say? Shlishi shebebnoi shebebitai, and he mentioned shebeben ishtai shebebas ishtai. That really gets us to 4, 8. That gets us it gets more to 8, right? You have the 4 on your side, and you got 4 on the other side. Correct, 8.
Yeah.
Those are all shnias. And then what's the third category? Revi'i shebechamav u'shebechamaisai shnia. The 4th generation of your father-in-law and your mother-in-law. What does that mean? So your father-in-law's mother's mother, your father-in-law's father's mother, your mother-in-law's mother's mother, and your mother-in-law's father's mother.
Wow.
Trying to find 4 ladies who would be your great-grandmother, your wife's great-grandmother.
I don't know why they only have 3.
Yes, and I'll tell you why. Because even though we're only going up 4 generations, in fact, what you're observing is the next Gemara's first question. Why did we call the wife
On this side of that one up there.
So you see, when Rav Chia mentioned these, he referred to the group going down towards the kids, the downward direction. He called the people we're discussing shlishi, 3 levels down. Whereas when he was talking about going up, he called it 4 levels up, except you only see in your picture, I'm assuming, 3.
Correct.
So what happened to the 4? So the answer is that we must be including your wife, because we're talking about your mother-in-law and your father-in-law. It's obvious we're including your wife as number 1, and then from your wife going up, the 4th generation up would be your mother-in-law's mother's mother, your father-in-law's mother's mother. Ask the Gemara, why when you're talking about the mother-in-law, father-in-law erevas or shnias, did you include your wife and therefore call it the 4th? But when you went down and talked about your kids and her kids, you didn't refer to your wife as part of it, or you as part of it. Meaning you didn't include your wife as generation 1 and then say it's Revi also. You want me to repeat that?
The wife is your kids or her kids from a different marriage? I'm not sure I'm clear on that.
Your wife's kids from a different marriage.
Different marriage.
Okay, so that's a
And yours also different marriage, but not kept not in different
Now,
marriage.
of course,
whatever.
if you happen to have kids from both, then it covers both. But yeah, the chiddush here is we're coming to tell you that even if it's just your wife's kids and all her progeny, or your kids and all your progeny that you didn't have from your wife. The Gemara is just asking a technical question now. Why, why not be consistent? So the Gemara gives a very obvious answer, right? So it says very simple. The whole discussion by mother-in-law's mother's mother and father-in-law's mother's mother and all those. Who's your father-in-law and your mother-in-law? The parents of your wife. They all come through your wife, so we're going to count your wife and not counting. Whereas So therefore, chashuv lehu lamata the isura lav mikayach ishtay kasi. Whereas going downwards,
Right, it's not coming from your wife.
at least on
Right.
your side. Again, if you're talking about your wife's kids, then maybe it should have been. But
Right.
so that's the Gemara's question. Even going downwards, your wife's kids come from her. Why not count her there? The Gemara says very simple. No, I did a ton of shlosha doros lamata diday. Once they were talking about you and your kids alone, and it didn't mention four, it only mentioned three. Tananami gimel doros lamata didah. Just to remain consistent, but einachanami it could have. This is just some administrative work. Amalei Rav Ashler Rav Kahana. Shniyos de Rabbi Chia. Yesh lahem hefsek le'ein lahem hefsek. If you remember what we said yesterday, I know we were rushing through it a little bit, but hefsek and ein hefsek means, do we say, for instance, your mother's 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 mother? Theoretically speaking, you had a very fertile family, and they were constantly having kids at a very young age, and your great 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 grandmother is still alive. Could you marry your great 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 grandmother? Or do we say no? Once you get past a certain level, that already becomes mutter. Do we say yesh hefsek, meaning it stops at a certain point, or do we say no, ain't hefsek? If it's your mother's 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 mother, your daughter's 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 daughter, if it's always like that, do we say the line continues down as a shniyah? So it says the Gemara Tashma. What do you mean? I'll bring you a proof from Rav. Did we not bring Rav yesterday? Rav said that there are only 4 women, Damar Rav, Dalid Nashim, Yesh Lahem Hefsek, that have a hefsek. Implication being that if they're not on that list, then they don't have a hefsek, and it goes on forever. Vesula. So the Gemara says no. Maybe Dilma Kikama Rav Lo'ahima Sissa. Maybe Rav was only referring to our original Mishnah where it mentioned those 8 shniyas that we started the discussion with. And from those 8, he said 4 of them are going to have a hefsek. But that Reb Chia's brisa could be, he'll agree, might have a hefsek. So the Gemara says, Toshma. The brisa said, Shlishi Urevi. Shlishi Revi'in. Tfeiloi. Very obvious. It said 3rd generation and 4th generation. All it needed to say was, it could have just said, aim chamav and or aim chamav and aim chamoso, but it didn't say that. It said the 3rd generation, the 4th generation. The implication is dafka that and not beyond, meaning to say yesh hefsek. So Gemara says second, Dilma mishlishi ve'elech miravi ve'elech. And the Gemara says okay, leaves it as a suffix. It's not sure. Continues the Gemara. Amalei Rava Rav Nachman, a new inyan. Chazi mar haimir rabbanon da'asami marava. Did you see these rabbis who came from Yerushalayim or from Eretz Yisrael v'amar and said the following boy marava, that they asked the following question marava? This is going to have nothing to do with shniyas. Let me take it back. It's going to have something to do with shniyas, but not the shniyas that we've been discussing. It says the Gemara, Gazru shniyas begeirim, oiloi gazru shniyas begeirim. What are we talking about here? You have a ger. A ger has a mom who's a ger. Okay, so a guy, let's say, who's not Jewish. We'll call him Joe. And Joe becomes Yosef. Becomes a Jew. Now, Joe, it's one thing very funny. As I was preparing this Gemara, I got a call about a friend of mine who's looking for a shidduch, and the girl that he's looking into happens to be, she's a ger. I felt it was so I wanted to call him right away and be like, say yes. I felt like I was in the middle of preparing this line of the Gemara when the call came in, and we were talking about this woman who, 7 years ago started the process of becoming a gerus, and it's been, 4 or 5 years, and 2 years ago she became Jewish, and she's, through Chabad, but whatever. Amazing. Unbelievable story. But either way, I just felt so. Yeah, I was literally learning this Gemara, and then the phone call came. I called the guy. I didn't answer the phone. Oh. Yeah, but either way, so says the Gemara. Let's say you have a guy, Joe. Joe's not Jewish, okay? Joe has a mother. We'll call her Sarah. Sarah's not Jewish, right? Let's say Joe gets married, becomes a Jew. Now it's Yosef. And let's say Sarah says, my son is becoming Jewish. I'm going to become Jewish. So is Sarah Joe's mother? I'm going to ask Kalman. Is Sarah Joe's mother halachically? No. The halacha by a ger, in Hebrew we would say, gershin is geir. When a ger becomes a ger, is kekatan shenolat. It's like he's reborn, and all of his past family that exists, even though under a microscope their DNA is connected, in halacha they're not connected. Now, technically, a man would be allowed to marry his mother. Technically, meaning maker hadin min haTorah. Min haTorah, that's not his mother. That's his mother when he was Jew, a goyish, but when he becomes a Jew, that's like unrelated completely.
How does that? It's unrelated completely.
Yeah, brother and a sister.
There's no shiva, nothing. What do you do for
nothing?
Father dies.
So nothing. You can as long as you're not being over on a virus.
Should maybe.
Are you allowed to bury your parents in a non-Jewish cemetery?
Yeah,
it's a very good question.
Yeah,
you can't bury them in a Jewish cemetery. They haven't converted.
You have to pay for it.
Why wouldn't you be allowed to bury?
I'm asking. I don't know.
You're allowed to bury anyone.
I have a close friend of mine who's a ger, and he has his sons are not Jewish. They're amazing guys. I know them. Amazing, beautiful boys.
Rabbis deal with these questions every day, but it's a little bit.
No, I think it's a good question. I like this question. Yeah, I like this question.
It's just a little bit. It's so deep. It would take a whole shiur, I think.
I understand.
No, I could. Yeah, I know. Okay. Very, very, very interesting. Gerus is a very, very good shmak.
You think there's no arayas with in Geras?
No erva, no erva.
There's no erva.
No.
You can marry your mother. Are you serious?
Technically. I'm trying to explain. Yeah. So we did make shnios. Okay, let's take this one step at a time. The rabbis came along and said, 1 second. It would be ridiculous.
Yeah,
They said 2 reasons. It would be ridiculous to marry your mother who was your mother, who you grew up as your mother, right? Of course. And it has a very similar feel to shnios. Meaning, the Torah says my father's brother's wife is an erva, but my mother's brother's wife is mutter. But it's my aunt. Come on, it's my aunt. The same thing over here. You ask this guy. He grew up his whole life. This lady has been cooking for him in the morning, bacon and whatever. And now, he's having some schmaltz herring with kichel, and his mother's still making it for him. Adarabah, they're probably living in the same house. Let's say the mother became a ger, and her son, she was Megayer. So they're living together. They're in the same house. This is my mother. She's right, but halachically she's not. Probably it's a big conversation. But the point is that in his head, she's his mother. Like I can hear the argument. I'm passing Shaila's here, but someone said to me, "Is there yichud with such a woman?" She's a Jewish lady who I'm not married to. She's a Jewish lady who's not my relative.
She already converted.
She converted. I converted. We're both converted. We're living in the same house. Is there a problem of yichud? So you're saying you're not saying it, but you're grimacing an idea that is, come on, yichud is only a concern that you're going to actually go do. But let me ask you, are you allowed to be alone with a 93-year-old lady who's on a... No, of course not. It's not about...
That the rabbi ran out of the house.
Yeah, of course. Yichud is a real thing. It's according to many Rishonim, it's an Issa.
But Kevin, if your mother converts, it's broken, no matter, even if you're converted?
100%.
Got it.
In almost every area of halacha that you can imagine, for instance, keep it av aim with your mother who's a convert. Midabanon for sure, it's a good Indian, a haftal rech kamocha for sure, but adopted. What do you mean adopted?
It doesn't matter if she's converted or not converted. It's done. Broken the minute you convert.
Yeah.
I got a cleaning lady downstairs that, I'm lifting weights, whatever. She comes downstairs to do something.
You're asking Yichud Shaila now? That is truly off topic. But yeah, okay. No, that's a good question. But
people deal with that.
That's a huge question.
Leave the door unlocked.
You leave the front door open, right?
There are ways to deal with
Right.
it.
She can get in.
Your wife works in the neighborhood? Your wife's local or she's away?
She's running an errand. She's at the
Nah.
doctor's office.
Your wife can pop in at any minute?
Of course, yeah.
I'm not passing Shaila.
Unless she's away.
I mean, if she goes away for a couple of days, it's a different story. If your wife's in the neighborhood and she can come in any 2 minutes, like she has a key, right? Okay. You can probably even lock the door. That'll make a difference. Your wife can come in at any moment. I'm not passing any shadows, but that's generally the
Everybody with cleaning lady has to deal
major
with
issue. Cleaning lady, I would love to do like just the halachas of a cleaning lady, cooking. I mean, so much
You don't
there.
want to see my cleaning.
You're not supposed to live in the house and stuff.
What's that?
I mean, in the other one, I don't know why my wife.
Yeah, you have problems with your wine. You have problems with your food. You have a lot of problems.
You think it's hard to look at her?
So there's a minute.
Wife is
Yeah.
gonna say,
Herbie comes in here, cleans by himself.
Right. Who says he's not
Yeah,
Why does she-
Why you even thought that?
our milk a problem?
We're
Doesn't matter.
Because he knows that if someone came in, if someone saw him in the fridge. But honestly, let me ask you, if you saw Herbie in the fridge, would you even think he's doing anything wrong?
He knows that he does the wrong thing.
Oh,
Right. Okay, weiter.
Every short time, cleaning.
But I can't tell. I did it already.
Okay,
Don't
calm.
go to me.
All right, let's come. So what are we asking over here? What's the question?
Every time.
So what's the Gemara really asking over here? Let's figure this out. The Gemara is asking, let's see, you have Joe and Sarah, they convert. Okay, so Joe and Sarah are not related anymore, halachically. Halachically, they are not Minatorah related. So now, Midrabanan, the rabbis came along. This is not the Gemara's question. What I'm about to say is true. You're not allowed to marry your mother who converted. You're a convert, she converted. You're not allowed to marry her Midrabanan. Why did the rabbis say that? There's a couple of reasons. One of the reasons the Gemara is going to mention is because we didn't want it that someone should convert, and all of a sudden, the halacha is that while he's a guy, the Torah says he can't marry such a woman, because the Torah has a rayas for a guy also. They have one of the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach is Gilei Arayas. And the arayas they have, he can't marry his mother, can't marry his sister. So that means a guy, Joe and Sarah, were not allowed to be together. The Torah says, as a guy, you have a certain level of kedusha, you can't marry your mother. And now you convert to Judaism, and that same lady who yesterday you couldn't be with, now the Torah says you can be with? What, becoming a Jew made it mutter to be with your wife? Because that statement is technically true, the rabbi said, you can't allow it to be that we're going to allow a person to marry someone who previously was an erva and now is not an erva. That's one of the reasons the Gemara talks about. Okay, so now ask the Gemara, that's my mother. What about my mother's mother? What if my Sarah, my mother, converts, and not only that, her mother converts. So now my previous, when I was a guy, my mother's mother was nothing to me, right? That's for sure. Now we all convert. So now I'm living in the house like a good Jewish boy. We take in my mother's mother, who's a little older, and she needs a husband. So I decided I want to marry her. Now she's not my erva for sure, because even if I was born from my mother, she's not my erva. That's only a shnia. My mother's mother is a shnia, right? Your mother's mother is a shnia to you. So what about if a person converts, his mother converts, and his grandmother converts, his mother's mother? Is she usher to me? Ask the Gemara, do we say shniyas by ger? That's the Gemara's question. Amar le Rav Nachman. Sorry, jumped behind. Amar Rav Nachman gate. Oh no, I don't. Where am I here?
Nachman said to Rav.
Yeah, I was right. Amar le Rav Nachman. Chazimar Haimer Rabban Dasim Rav Amar B'Marava. Gazer shniyas begerim like gazer shniyas begerim. This question. Amar le Hashlu Ma Ereva Gufa. Ilav Shelo Yom Rubayin Mikdusha Chamur LeKdusha Kala Gazer B'Rabbanon. You're asking me this question that if, my own mother, if we converted, min haTorah, I'm allowed to be with. The only reason why I'm also to her is only min derabanan. And you're now, and had I not made that gzeira, I could be with her. You're now asking me about her mother? About the shniyos mibaye? That can't be. Meaning shniyos only makes sense because we're making a gzeira because of an erva. Like, why is my mother's mother a problem? Because my mother's an erva. But that's because my mother birthed me. She's my mother. She's an erva. So her mother is a shnia. But if I'm a guy and I convert, my mother's not my mother in halacha, because gershon is gayers kekatan shenola dami. So therefore, her mother's not even. What's the concern? My mother's mother should be also because maybe you might come to be with your mother. Your mother itself is only a derabanan. There is no erva for you for this guy. In fact, a ger can only his first erva is when he gets married.
What's
or has a kid.
It's already also you can't marry a guy anyway.
No. We're talking about everyone's converted. They're all converted. So everyone's converted. Yeah. Since they're all converted, technically, my mom is just a random woman.
If my wife's mother converted, she would be a sneeze to me.
That's the question of the Gemara. The question of the Gemara is, well, actually, no, I'm talking your wife's mother. If she converted, so now she's not your wife's mother in halacha.
That's right.
Right. So you could probably marry her.
There's no.
Yeah, but the Gemara is saying that there's right. Yeah, technically.
I would think there were.
But again, it's a little bit different there. But okay. We'll go back to Amar Rav Nachman Geirim. Once we're talking about Geirim, let's have a non-shnius related conversation about Geirim. Amar Rav Nachman Geirim Hoylva Ason Asuliyadon. Once we're discussing Geirim, Neimahu B'Mil. So let's talk about Geirim a little bit. Says the Gemara. Achim min oein velo yoidu. What's the question? Let's say I have you. Let's say, Kalman, you and your brother, you witnessed something. Are you guys allowed to be Edom together?
No.
Brothers are what's called krovim, right? You can't. It's puzzle. Aaron and Kayan, Aaron and Moshe, even though they were the most reliable people in the world, if the two of them went ahead and did Edus, puzzle. Brothers are puzzle from Edus. The Edus cannot be relatives, father and son, brothers, other things. So what if you have a ger who has a brother, okay, and they both convert? So now you have brothers. They were brothers as Goy, but now they're Jews. So halachically, they're not brothers. Minat Torah, their Edus they shouldn't say Edus, right? Let's say they come in a case, I saw Reuven kill Shimon or whatever it is, right? So it says the Gemara. Achim min ha'em. So you have two brothers that are brothers from their mother, not from their father, that converted, right?
Yeah.
Lo ye'idu, shouldn't make Edus. The im he'idu, Edus and Edus, says the Gemara, their Edus is a good Edus. Of course it is. The second part makes tons of sense because they're not relatives, so their Edus is good. But why shouldn't they be made? Meaning, if they're not related, then there's no reason why they shouldn't. So Gemara says, however, Achim and Av, if they're brothers from their father, then we say even me'idin lechatchila.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Again, we're talking. They're all converted. So really, at the end of the day, there's no difference between Av and Aim. Now, Meimer Amar no. Afilu Achim min ha'Aim. He says no. What's the difference? Av and Aim. If they're not related, then they should be able to say Edus lechatchila, whether they're brothers from the mother or brothers from the father. Nami me'idin lechatchila. So okay, in which case then umay shna me'arayos. Now Rashi over here explains this question over here a little bit better because it's not clear in the Gemara what it's asking. It says Rashi Edus me'arayos damar lekama beperek nos. And later on we're going to see that a ger that was married If a ger marries his sister from his mother, so let's say a family became converted.
Get married sister from his brother. Got
Right?
it.
So
Sister.
family
Sister,
converted.
Right.
My mom
She's
had
also
me, and my
converted.
mom
She's
had
converted.
it. We're all
She's
converted. Now, who is this woman? And I married this lady now, and now marry her after we convert.
Your sister.
The kedushin takes. Why? Because
Your
she's not.
sister?
Yeah.
Your
My sister. My sister.
Your
My sister.
Your sister from your
Min
mother.
Torah, she's just another lady, because she's a ger and I'm a ger. So the kedushin takes. She's just another Jewish lady. Later on in the Gemara, we're going to see that you have to divorce her.
Right?
You have to divorce her, even though technically speaking, there's nothing wrong with it. The Gemara is going to explain later. So ask the Gemara, Maishno Ma'arayis, where over there we say you retain some level of problem with your sister, and over here, two brothers are going to be completely mutter to say Eidos, even though, right? Meaning, why don't we say that you shouldn't? Gemara says, Erva L'Kol Masura. It's very simple. It's a derabanan. If people see ervas of getting married, they're going to think, "What's going on over here? You can marry your sister." So therefore, people are going to make the mistake. They're going to come to think that even Yisrael is mutter to do that thing, meaning even a Yisrael who was born in Yisrael. Whereas Eidos is lebezdin masura. The whole concern is who should accept the Eidim or not accept the Eidim. Who's under discussion here? Bezdin. Bezdin knows the laws. They know the rules. They know the rule is that two brothers. So therefore, lichatchila, two brothers who are brothers from when they were not Jewish, convert. They can come lichatchila into Bezdin and say Eidos because in halacha they're not brothers. People are going to look at them and say, "Oh, you see they're testifying." No, we're not. Bezdin's going to see that. Bezdin's going to say, "We know the halacha. We're not going to allow two regular Jewish brothers." To testify, and so therefore there's no concern.
Like in the base on Mikdash, we don't make some xeros in
because there's that's a little bit of a different idea, but it's this crossover. Okay, Shniyos, at least for now, we're gonna hold on that conversation, putting a button in it. I'll just say the one scenario of Shniyos that actually doesn't come up now, thank God, but it did come up a lot. It was after the Holocaust.
Right.
When people passed, you came back to your shtetl, you didn't know anyone.
A lot of people married family, aunts, uncles. A lot.
So let's say your wife's sister. That's not a shnius. That's actually that's arayis. But if your wife died, let's say she was killed in the camps, you know her mother, you know her father, you know her siblings. Okay, made a lot of sense. But even so, let's say you'd be talking about you might have a scenario where you have, especially in those days where people were having kids at many different ages. You can have two brothers, let's say, right? Where one brother is like 15, 20 years younger than another brother. And all of a sudden, let's say your brother's aunt or something like that, which would be a shniel, let's say, you'd be allowed to marry. A lot of times it made a lot of sense to marry her because at least you knew her family. So it's nowadays.
People, even before the Holocaust, people were dirt poor. It was expensive to marry off a girl. It made sense
to keep things in the family. I'm only mentioning the Holocaust because in that scenario you have people dying.
You're allowed. You're allowed.
Allowed and very common.
Yeah.
I know my wife.
I have relatives.
Were cousins.
Yeah, I have relatives that are first cousins.
Yeah, correct.
It's
my wife's grandparents were second cousins, but I know people were first cousins. A lot of people.
I just made a family tree of my father's family. So many first cousins are married to each other.
Oh, wow.
You can't even believe it.
Wow.
Yeah.
In the Holocaust?
I'll show it to you. Just in Europe, in America, it's just customary.
Okay, new Mishnah.
The Hasidim do that now these days?
I don't know. No clue. Says the Mishnah, new Mishnah. This Mishnah over here is going to be teaching. It's going to be going over some Hilchos Yevamos. We'll go through it. We're going to be talking a little bit about Mamzer today.
This is today's daf.
Chad Beis is today's day. Let's say a person has a brother. We've been working under the assumption that, of course, again, this is a theme that we'll see in Yevamos. When we start the Masechta, we go through all these Akdamas, and we spend all these times introing different topics, we end up bringing up all of these topics that the Gemara is going to come later and tell us, but I need to bring them up early so that we understand Gemara's earlier. We're going to come to Mishnayos, we're going to be like, I don't need this Mishnah. This Mishnah is obvious. But the reason why it's obvious is because we talked about it earlier, but really the Mishnah is only teaching us now. Says the Mishnah, when a person does Yibum, he does Yibum with his brother's wife. Well, what's considered a brother? Says the Gemara, we'll see exactly what this is coming to include. It means anyone who's a brother from the father. Obviously, when I'm saying brother from the father, we'll see it'll even include maybe someone who's a mamzer, maybe something. We'll see exactly what we're talking about. Zokik es eshes achiv libum. So anyone who has a brother, and that guy dies or you die, whatever. If there's a brother, now you have a yibum situation. The echav hu l'chol davar, and not only that, this brother that is your brother for yibum is your brother for all other things. We'll see what l'chol davar is coming to include in the Gemara. Chutz, who's it excluding? Mimi sheyesh le'ach min hashifcha u'min ha'averes kechavim. What if your father produced you, and you are a Jewish man, nothing to talk about from your mom was Jewish, and your father had an affair with a non-Jewish lady,
This cleaning lady.
This cleaning lady, and they produced a child. So, and that's a boy. So Reuven and Bobby are brothers. Technically, in human parlance, we would say they're brothers, they're paternal brothers. So says the Gemara, that's not your brother. So if that guy is married, let's say he marries a Jewish lady, Nebuch, and he dies, Dina, right, his Dinah, his wife, Jewish lady, does not fall to in Yibum. We don't, again, we're saying things that sound super obvious, but again, they're super obvious because we laid these things out before. Well, you're a Jew. It's your Goyish brother, let's say, who died. His wife can't fall to you. We don't say
he died.
Yeah.
The
And Agav, it's true the other way also. Meaning, if you're Goyish and he's Jewish, the fact that you share, doesn't change. But the Torah is only talking to the Jew. We're not talking to the guy. So it's do you have a mitzvah to do yibum with your Goyish brothers? So shivcha knainis, averis kechavim, whatever it is, fine. That's the halacha of brother, and we're going to see in a moment that the same rules apply to a son. Meaning, what's the halacha? In order for there to be a din yibum, you have to have no children. So if Shimon dies without children, that's when Reuven has a din yibum. What if Shimon has children? Then he doesn't do yibum. So we're going to see what's called a son. Says the Gemara, Mishi Yeshlei ben mikol makom, any type of son. Poter eishes aviv mina yibum. That makes the mother poter from yibum. Poter eishes aviv mina yibum. They bring rayas from this Mishnah that the woman is also chayiv in the mitzvah yibum. That's been a discussion until now. I just want to just briefly tickle your lamdasha brain for a moment. I'm allowed to do yibum. Let's say why? Because I have a mitzvah sasei, and yibum is mutter. Because mitzvah sasei is docha lav sheish beikaris. At least that was the Gemara's explanation earlier. Yeah. So that explains why I'm allowed to do it. I have a lav of sheish beikaris. But does the woman have a mitzvah of yibum? If the woman does not have a mitzvah of yibum, then I can do it, but she can't. And if she can't, and I can, how can I do this? Every time I do yibum, I'm forcing her to be over on an avera. There's a discussion that comes up just to think about. So someone to say it's not a problem. Women also have mitzvah yibum. They bring a raya from this Mishnah because it says over here very clearly, poter eishes of a mina yibum. It's not lav dafka, is it a very strong raya? The lashon of poter might just simply mean not from her, it means from the parsha or from the zika of yibum, but we
used it before also, potrussel.
100%. That's why it's not a very strong raya. It was for me, it was a peg. I'm pegging the question, right? They say a similar question by sukkah. They use in the opposite direction. You have a mitzvah of sleeping in a sukkah. In a chutzlar, it's mipnei hakur, whatever, different reasons why you get out of it. But they say a woman is pater from sleeping in a sukkah because it's a mitzvah sejas man grama, and she doesn't have to sleep in a sukkah. So she doesn't have to go out. You do. Some poskim want to say they're melamed zchus on people who don't sleep in a sukkah by saying that the mitzvah of sukkah has to be teishu kein tedura. Since teishu kein tedura, it means I have to live in the sukkah the way I would live in my house, and if I live in my house, I sleep in the same room with my wife. Well, if I can't have my wife in the sukkah,
but you would think
then they're from pater also.
Right, but they knew that before they made it.
The weather was better.
Your wife's not sleeping with you anyway. Is the point in the sukkah? That's
Maybe she would.
It's one of the svaras they use. A similar idea. And now some want to use it the opposite. Some want to say that even though she's pater because the mitzvah says man grama, because of teishu keitudur, she has a mitzvah to help me become my mitzvah.
Makes more sense to me.
And therefore, that's a good dimion to what we're saying over here. Maybe Yibum is the same thing. Maybe even though she doesn't technically have a mitzvah Yibum, I do, but what's my mitzvah Yibum with? Her. So by definition, that means now she's mitzvah, and therefore that mitzvah makes it mutter for her to go ahead and do the act.
But it's possible to say she has no mitzvah Yibum, but also no erva, meaning the erva has been...
That's a harder thing to say, though, because now you're saying that, and even if she didn't have it, not so clear. But okay, I hear. Yeah, all right. Either way,
it has to do with a get. Let me ask you a question.
Good.
A get. Is there a mitzvah for get? To give a get is not a mitzvah. Is that a mitzvah?
Yeah.
So the woman can't give a get. It's the same like.
Yeah, her role in the same thing with chalitza. Meaning, her role in it is her role is passive.
Even when you're saying even, you mean chalitza also same thing.
Yeah, same thing. Okay, says the Gemara. Mishi yeshlei ben mikol makom. Let's say a person has a son of any type. Poter eishes avim min hayibum. Once you have a child, now there's no longer a din yibum. V'chayiv al makasei. Once we're talking about sons, we'll say that if you have such a son that paters from yibum, well, that son, if he hits you, he's chayiv misa. If a son's not allowed to hit his father. And also if he curses his father. U'b'noi l'chol davar, he's your son in all areas, except we'll see in the Gemara for something, right? So Chutz says the Mishnah, me, sheyesh ben min hashifcha u'min ha'aved. It's the same thing like we said by brother. If your son is a son from a guy, there's still a din yibum. Okay. Says the Gemara, what did it mean over here in the Mishnah when it said that a brother mikol makom. What is that actually coming to include? Says the Gemara, it's coming to include a mamzer. For the Gemara, who cares if he's a mamzer? A brother's a brother's a brother. Mamzer's a Jew. Mamzer didn't do anything wrong. Meaning his parents didn't do something wrong. Did something wrong, but maybe, let's say, unless he's the son of a mamzer, someone did something wrong at some point. Pshita asked the Gemara, echavu, right? He's your brother. And the din of Yibam is about your brother. I might think that we'll learn out ki yeshvu achim yaftav of Yibam from the parsha of Yaakov Avinu when they went and Yosef and we're brothers of our father. We're 12 brothers, and you see all those 12 malaholim ksherim v'loy psul, and all of those were not mamzerim. They were all ksherim. So I might think so too. Afkan, so to here ksherim v'loy psulim. Kamashmalon, we don't say that. Says the Gemara. Okay, it's a wonderful havamina. I asked the Gemara, but it's such a good havamina. I don't understand why you didn't do it. Maybe say, let's learn out achim to teach me that a mamzer would not have a din yibum, meaning a mamzer and lechura we would understand from. Okay, we'll keep it here step by step. Mamzer as a brother, I might have a havamina that you don't have a din yibum. The Gemara says no. Kivin delinian yibum mifter nifter. Since when it comes to the son, if you have a son as a mamzer, that's going to mean that you have no longer a din yibum with your brother's wife because he has a son who's a mamzer. Miskik namizakik. So too, if it's a brother who's a mamzer, there's going to be a din yibum. The way Rashi speaks it out over here, I'll speak it out outside. Is what's the whole purpose of doing yibum again? To continue the family. So if you're telling me that he has a son who's a mamzer, that means you no longer have responsibility to bring his house up. Well, if he's a mamzer, what is the difference? His house still requires being filled, so therefore it's going to work in both directions. Okay, Mishnah said that such a person, even all of these brothers are. Yeah, we have a rabbi likes seeing two dots. When you see two dots, it's like it shows you short Gemaras.
This is the regular Gemara.
We had like 5 flat without any 2 dots.
Yeah. What are you coming to tell me that a brother is a brother is a brother? Liyarsho. It's coming to tell me that the halacha is that although normally, who do you yarsh? You get your yerusha from your father. Let's say someone dies, doesn't have any kids. So then it goes to his father. Meaning, if you don't give it to your son, then you give it to your parents. If you don't have any parents around, and you don't have any kids around, so who does your stuff go to? It goes to your brothers. So therefore, I need to know, is this a brother or not? Because if it's a brother, then he's going to eventually share in the Yerusha. If he's not, then not. So says the Mishnah, the brother that paters from Yibam, or said better yet, the brother that's Mechayiv in Yibam is the same brother that's going to Yarshin. And this is consistent with what we've seen already 2 or 3 times in the Masechta, that the brothers that we use when we talk about the brothers for Yibam are defined as those brothers that you have Yerusha from, and that's how they're distinct from your brothers from your mother, where you don't have Yerusha from. Ula tamalo, the halacha is that you're allowed as a Kohen to only be matama for 7 people, one of which is your brother. What type of brother? A brother min ha'av v'lo minay. Pshita. Says the Gemara, this is obvious. One second, yeah. Pshita, this is obvious. Echavu. What's the discussion in the Mishnah? Why would I have a havamina that you wouldn't have a din of latamalo liyarsho? Salkatet chamina, I might think hoyol uksiv, since the pasuk says ki im l'she'eroi hakarav elav. I might think that just like by the Torah, the parsha of Tumah of a Kohen, it refers to your wife as she'eroi v'amra mar she'eroi zu ishtoi, and the pasuk continues and talks this follows and says uksiv lo yitame ba'al ba'amav lehechalo, that the husband shall not be metama in his nation to just I don't know what's exactly how to touch the words, but the point is the Gemara has a drasha. Desecrate, thank you. Yesh bal shmetama, yesh bal metama. You see from here that there are some types of husbands that they can go be metama, and there are some types of husbands that cannot be metama. What's the distinction? Haketzad metama hu leishtei ksheira. If his wife has done nothing wrong, she's his regular wife, nothing to talk about, then yes, when his wife when he has to go be metama himself in order to go to a cemetery for his wife, he's allowed to. The ein matama l'ishtei psula, but if his wife does something, let's say for instance, she's mezana, is the way some Rishonim say it, or maybe she was a grusha, whatever it is. Let's say he's not allowed to be with his wife, or he's master his wife after she went with someone else. Any type of scenario where the Torah says you can't stay married. Perfect example. Kain with a grusha, amon l'kain heda, kain gadol, whatever it is. If let's say that's the scenario, says the Gemara, the Psukim teach us that he's not allowed to be matama for her. And Rashi says a very interesting thing here, which is not our conversation, but he says that. He says, well, we'll get to the answer. So I might have a havamina so to matamahu la'ach kosher ve'matama la'ach pasel. Mean this mamzer, kamash malon, that we don't. Says the Gemara, 1 second. This is a good drasha. Meaning, a brother is a brother is a brother. You can never not be brothers. But since you're supposed to halachically divorce this woman who, let's say, cheated on you, or she's a grusha and you're a kain, whatever it is. So therefore, it's lafuke kaima. So the way Rashi says it is very interesting. Rashi says lafuke kaima hilkach lav ishtayhi, which is a tremendous chiddush. Because what do you mean? Rashi's saying that the fact that you have to divorce her, now that she's died, you didn't divorce her. You were supposed to, right? She dies, she's not your wife. Very interesting svara. I don't know what the svara would be to explain Rashi. But either way, the idea is that since she was, when she died, someone who you weren't supposed to divorce, we're going to say it's almost like a knas. We're not going to allow you, min haTorah, to be matama for her. Whereas if she was a wife that's a regular wife, then you would. Whereas a brother could do nothing to make you guys no longer brothers, even if he tried to. You can't, even if he went off the derech, if he converted to Christianity, it doesn't make a difference. He's still halachically your brother, and therefore that's something that nothing to talk about. You're always going to be have it. Yeah, you're going to have it in Yibam for. Okay, the Mishnah continued and said, "Who's the exclusion in the Mishnah of brothers? If your brother is a guy, my time and you need a pasuk. It's very interesting. Meaning, had the Torah not had a pasuk, it sounds like I would have thought that you would have a din yibum, because technically speaking, what your father birthed two people. Your brother, who's not Jewish, is married to a Jewish lady. He dies, and that Jewish lady falls to. It sounds like on some level that would have been called, which is very interesting. I mean, he's a guy. I mean, what's the relation? Says the Gemara. Now, I have to assume that this is just like an asmachta to a mitzias. I don't exactly know why I'd have a havamina, but either way, the pasuk's talking about an Eved Knaini, as a Jew who marries a Shifcha Knainis because his master marries him off to a Shifcha Knainis, which he was allowed to do. And that Shifcha Knainis will eventually become Jewish. However, that Shifcha Knainis has a child with the Eved Ivri. The child goes after the Shifcha Knainis. She's a guy. Child's technically not Jewish. So who did the child belong to? And I guess this is the pasuk teaching me the idea, gufa, of that relationship. It says, this Goyish woman and the Eved Ivri have a child. Who does the child belong to? It does not belong to the Shifcha Knainis. It belongs to the Adon. It belongs to the master of the slaves. What do you see? You see that it doesn't go by the guy, it goes by the owner. So too over here we'll say that there's no yields by a guy, and so therefore the halach is going to be that your non-Jewish brother is not really halachically your brother. Continue the Gemara. The Mishnah said that someone who has a son, any type of son, is going to pater from Yibum. My same question here that we had before. Says the Gemara, it's coming to teach me the halacha of a mamzer. A mamzer son is still going to mean there's no din yibum. My time, huh? Why? The pasuk says ben einlai. The pasuk says ben einlai when you're talking about yibum, and he doesn't have a child. Now the word ein is written with a yud. Now, oftentimes in the Torah, when the word ein is written, it's written without a yud. So therefore, the fact that it's written with a yud, it seems like it's something extra. The Gemara uses that drasha of the yud to say ayin olav, meaning to say, take the aleph, convert it to an ayin, and read the word as if it says ayin alav. Look into him, meaning to say, if you find that he's a mamzer, it means that's enough.
Technically, I don't think that's true.
Meaning technically,
the word ain always has a yud. So
Rashi does
explain that. We'd have to understand.
Yeah. So Rashi says, I'm quoting Rashi when he says, Rashi brings matzin lemichtav uben einlai kedamin b'kiddushin ein kesef. Right? By kiddushin it says ein kesef. And we dash, it's chaser yud.
What I'm saying is either 99.9% or 100%.
It happens to be one of the cases where it does say it is ukmo me'ein yevami.
So they're using the word me'ein, which is
a little bit of an off. Yeah. Okay. Me'ein bilam.
And also we don't know if there's Shiur, so we're not even sure whether Rashi had some.
Correct.
Without.
All right, weiter.
Have a great day.
We're talking about a son, if a son hits his father.
Say goodbye to the boys tonight, Robert. It's leaving. Tonight's the last night of shul.
All right. We're holding now the chayav al makasa.
No, in 6 weeks.
So just to clarify, the Gemara said, Mishnah had said the following. We're talking about the halacha of yibum. You need brothers, and we also said that if you have a son, there's no din yibum. This is basic yibum 101. So now, what happens if the son who says by having that son, you now no longer have a din yibum? That same rule that says that son makes you not have a din yibum, is that son also, halacha is, he's not allowed to hit you. If a son hits a father, technically it's chayv misa. And obviously, he needs asra and he needs edim, but I'm saying generally speaking, it's a very big deal.
What age?
Once he's high, I mean, technically once he's 13, but I'm saying really, I mean, in chinuch, certainly from a much younger age. But
is it possible that Chris Rock is Will Smith's father? Just asking.
Wow, current events. Current events.
I teach at a school.
Oh, you got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that.
Okay,
Embarrassment.
that was funny. I thought it was funny. Okay, so what's that? Amai. Why would you say that Yechayev?
Hits you.
Kari kan v'nasi ba'am chalei sa'ar. The pasuk, which is going by nasi, by a covet of a nasi, that you shouldn't curse the nasi, and we said over there, ba'oisa ma'isa amcha is only true when he's acting the way he's supposed to act. He's not doing averos. So that's the answer. So what are we talking about over here? We're talking about where he did tshuva. So since he did tshuva, therefore it's going to be a problem of cursing. So too, hachanami. Hachanami kisha asa tshuva. When you're talking about a mamzer, right? We'll see over here. It says the Gemara that works for a nasi, or the other discussions we saw in Chagiga, which we're going to see in a minute. The high bar tshuva. How can you say this person is a bar tshuva? How can a person who's a mamzer? A person had a bia with a nerva, created a mamzer. Okay, now he felt really bad. He said, Hashem, I'm really sorry. Yeah? But the Maisa, there's a mamzer walking around the world. How could that tshuva ever truly be true tshuva? Yeah. Say mamzer, and the reason is because what? The mamzer is walking around. You can't shoot the mamzer in the head. It's killing a person. You got a mamzer walking around proving you that you did it. How can you ever do true tshuva? Gemara says, you're right. He did tshuva. He tried his best. He did tshuva. And yeah, you have the mamzer running around. But it's still, so he hasn't done tshuva gemura. It's not nasa like his chuyos. But he's changed his ways. Okay, so the mamzer running around the world. So therefore, says the Gemara, that's the person you have to show covet to. And therefore, I mean, that's the Gemara's question. Even a mamzer is going to have a din that he's chayiv misa if he hates his father. Yeah, why? Isn't his father a Russia? His father, how did he make a mamzer? Now you might say, and to me, I didn't understand this Gemara's question. Why do we have to assume that the child is a child of an erva? Why can't it be was a mamzer, and his father's father was a mamzer, and his father's father was a mamzer, and this is his great grandson? He's a mamzer. So I can't be mefachaben my father because his father's father's father did a bad thing. I don't have a good answer to that, but I didn't look into it.
Maybe the answer is there was a distinction, so we wanted to apply to all cases.
But now we're already what? Rabbanons? I mean, it's just. I'm saying I think it's a decent ha'ara. Either way, Tana Rabbanon. The Brisa says the following: This is we're going to start a discussion that we're not going to finish today, but we're going to get to most of it, and then we're going to continue tomorrow. What happens? What is ba'al achoso v'hi bas eishes aviv? So it's very simple. It's my father had me with a lady, and he had my sister with another lady. So who is she to me? She is both my sister and my father's daughter, right? So there's two separate psukim in the Torah. Let's say my father had me with my mother, wedding, ishus, and he had my sister with a side lady, like a mistress.
There's only one answer,
right? So a side lady is not my sister in ishus; she's only my sister because he had a mistress, right? So the Torah has two separate psukim for the daughter of my father. In one place, it talks about when she's in marriage produced, and one when it's out of marriage, wedlock or out of wedlock. Okay. So the Torah has two psukim. So we have to figure it out. So let's say a person should sleep with such a woman. So she's my father's daughter, and she's also my sister.
Meaning his full sister.
It's full sister. That contains within a both. Yeah. This question to a certain extent could really be had by by any of by your daughter and your wife's daughter. What if it's both your wife's daughter and your daughter? Those are also two psukim. So, but the Gemara is bringing it by this case. Meaning to say, if let's say it's b'shaygig, he's got to bring two chatases because he's a balkaris. If we give him hasra, you have to give him hasra on either one or maybe on both. Whatever it is, it's hard to understand. I'm assuming the nafkamina is karbanos because I don't understand what else the nafkamina would be. You can't, and if you did it, we're talking about karbanos. I don't know what else we're talking about. Rabbi Yossi ben Yehuda Omer, no, ein chayav elu mishum achoso bilvad. You're only chayav for achoso, but lo mibnei bas eishes aviv. He says you can't be chayav for both. sounds a little bit like a kamle b'derabineh, but it's not a b'derabineh. These are all the same level. So he says you're not chayiv for both. My time mayu the rabbanon. Why did the rabbanon say you're chayiv for both? He says, what do you mean? It's two psukim. Amri michti ksiv. The pasuk says ervas achoischa bas avicha oy bas imecha. And there it doesn't mention anything about ishus. Nothing in that pasuk about it being ishus related. So there it sounds like it's your sister through, let's say, oines and mefata. And ervas bas eishes avicha meiledes avicha achoischahi. And in both places, you have two separate isurim. So what's that pasuk? Lamali. What do I need the second pasuk for? Shema mino l'chayv mishum achayz mishum bas eishes achiyav. Sorry, bas eishes of. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. What does he say? Amakra. He says no. The pasuk in the second pasuk by Ishus says achoischahi. Titiru mishum achayz ato mechayvai v'ato mechayvu mishum bas eishes of. Meaning, he's not answering why there's two psukim. He's just saying that the word achoschahi in the second pasuk tells you to not punish him for two averas, but only for one. V'rabbanon, what are you going to do with the pasuk of achoschahi? V'rabbanon hay achoschahi mai avdilei miboilu l'chayvay el achoisai bas aviv ubas imai. That's coming to talk about if, let's say, you were with your sister, the daughter of your father, and the daughter of your mother as an oinus. Because if you take a look in the pasuk, by ervas achoischa bas avicha, and here's the punchline, oh bas imecha. The Torah does not actually say ve'imecha, meaning if we're talking about the daughter of your father through an oinus, we don't actually have it in the Torah that your father's daughter, who is both your father and your mother's daughter. Let's say you raped your mother, right? So you raped your mother and had, again, raped your mother would mean that you're also not from, right? Because if it's, unless what, he married after and then had you, whatever it is. The point is you can have a scenario where a daughter is a sister who is a sister from your father and mother who was happened through an onus, and the Torah doesn't explicitly say that such a woman is an erva, even though, of course, it's a kol sheken. Meaning, if just from my father and just from my mother is a problem, then certainly if it's from both the father and the mother, then for sure that's an erva. But the chiddush of the Gemara is that lo yimer she'ein mazhirin min adin. There's a general rule that in order for a person to receive malchus if he does it on purpose, right, or to get be chayve carbon if he does a b'shogeg, or no malchus on purpose, right? Because chayve krisus, if you give an azhara, chayve krisus, there's no punishment in this world. Like chayve misas bezin, you get misa. Chayve, so the halach is by chayve krisus, if you give an azhara by chayve krisus, they get malchus, right? So let's say a person's about to sleep with his, not kalasa, that's a bad example. Achus imo, right? His mother's sister. That's chayve krisus. He's chayve kares. So a person's about to sleep with him, so I want to stop him. I say, don't do it. If you do that, you're going to be chayav malchus. That's the halacha. If he does it, we hit him. That's the halacha. So now, in order to have him get malchus, I have to be able to say to him, don't do it. You're usher because of this avera. If a person's about to sleep with his father and mother's daughter, so his full sister, what avera in the Torah do I point to? So I don't have an avera if it's through an oinus, because it says ervas achoischa bas avicha oy bas imecha. Doesn't actually say bas avicha ve bas imecha. So although you could make a kol shekain to say, of course that's usher, I don't have an explicit pasuk in the Torah to say so. So since I don't have an explicit pasuk in the Torah, I wouldn't be able to give an azhara because you can't say an azhara as a kol shekain. This is the Rabbanan's answer. It's a little bit complicated, but that's how that they understand from achos chayim.
This is the source for all of the Torah.
And this would be, yes, correct. V'she'ein mazar min adin. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, who uses achos chayim, teach you that you're only over on one avera, you're not over on both, or at least we're not going to punish you for both. Im Kain, he says, the whole pasuk achos chayim is not needed. He says, Lichtei v'rachmana achoscha. Achoscha on its own could have taught that to me. He, lamali, what's that second word? To teach me like I'm saying, mishum achoscha tamechayv v'tamechayv mishum bas eishazov, meaning he agrees to the idea of ein masir min adin, and achoscha teaches that. The word he teaches me additionally that you're only going to be over on one avera, not on two. Okay, v'rabbanon, what do you do with the word he? Meaning, l'chur, that's right. He says no. Afal gav dechsev achoscha itzrich lemichtav he. I need both. Why? As follows, meaning to say that in general we won't say Yemazir min adin. Because sometimes, many times, there are scenarios where the Torah will write a halacha really for no reason. You could have learned it from a kal v'chomer, but the Torah is sort of like almost like maybe one of the explanations might be that the Torah will sometimes write a pasuk that you would have anyways learned from a kal v'chomer to support the idea of the kal v'chomer. Meaning, But really, we don't learn anything from it because you would have had it from a Kal V'Chaimer.
I'm losing it. What's the Machlekes Rabbanan Rabbi Yosi again?
Whether a person is chayiv, let's say 2 chatases, or he's because twice when he sleeps with his father's daughter. Because on the one hand it's his sister, and on the other hand it's his father's daughter.
Yes,
So there's 2 averas.
Who says
So
what?
Rabbanan says Yechayiv 2. Rabbi Yosi says Yechayiv 1. And they're going back and forth between figuring out which pasuk tells me what. Rabbanan saying it's 2 psukim. I got 2 psukim. I got 2 averas. Rabbi Yosi said, but the pasuk says Achos Chahi to tell me no. You're only going to be Chayiv 1. And they're going back and forth to figure out which way to go. So now Achos Chahi by Rabbi Yosi is used to teach me only 1. The Rabbanan say no. The Rabbanan say I have 2 psukim. So says the Gemara. What do you do? Rabbanan. He says that teaches me the halacha of ein mazhar min adin, meaning that I need to have an explicit statement in the Torah of the Isser. I can't just say, well, I can learn from a Kal V'Chaimer that thing's Asr. I need to have it explicit in the Torah, and therefore he teaches me that that even when it's your father's daughter and mother's daughter, meaning your sister, it's a full sister, that's also going to be Asr because by anusa, because the Torah by anusa does not actually say your full sister. It just says your father's daughter or your mother's daughter. But what about your father and mother's daughter? That's not explicitly written, even though, of course, you would know it. It's a Kal V'Chaimer. If my father's daughter and my mother's daughter are a problem, certainly my father and mother's daughter is a problem. But since we're talking about an Azhara, in order to give Malchus, in order to give a punishment, you can't learn that from a Kal V'Chaimer. So therefore, Achoscha teaches that to me. Rabbi Yosi says, I learned that halacha from Achoscha. What's he? He teaches me what he said, that it's only going to be an Isser of Achosa and not for 2. The Rabbanan said no. He is also needed to support the idea of Ein Mizhar Min Adin, because he says maybe the word Achoscha is only being written because sometimes the Torah will write the word that you could also learn from a Kal V'Chaimer because of the concept of Milsa Da'asi B'Kal V'Chaimer, Tarach HaKasav L'Kra. Sometimes the Torah will do that even though it really has no purpose. And on that, the Gemara says, Kasav Rachmana, he says the Rabbanan, in order to teach me the halacha like we just learned, he to teach me that Ein Mizhar Min Adin, and La'olam, I don't have a pasuk available to tell me only 1 avera, but rather there's 2. Rabbi Yosi, okay, so there's a machlekes. Rabbi Yosi and the Rabbanan are arguing over which way it goes. Rabbi Yosi, Bar Yehuda, Imkein Lichte V'Rachmana.
Who says that you only chayiv?
Rabbi Yosi says you only chayiv 1. He says, and therefore Achos Chahi is there to teach me that exact point, that you only chayiv 1. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yehuda, Imkein, according to you Chachamim, the pasuk says Achos Chahi. It should just say Lichte V'Rachmana LaAchos Chahi Be'idach Kra. Meaning, according to you, the placement of Achos Chahi is problematic. Achos Chahi should be taught in the parsha of Onus. The word Achos Chahi that we're all discussing is taught by Ishus. If according to you, the Rabbanan, it's coming to teach me this whole concept entirely of Ein Muzar Min Adin, and even he is teaching that to me, that entire parsha should have been written by Onus, where it's teaching it. Why is it teaching it to me by Ishus? It's coming to tell me that by Ishus to say that you should ignore the other pasuk and only say your chayiv once. For Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yehuda, fine. So that's the end of the day. That's the machlekes in terms of whether you're chayiv 2 or you're chayiv 1. Now the Gemara just asks a kasha. Rabbi Yosi, Rabbi Yehuda, who says you're only chayiv 1 malchus or 1 chatas in this situation, even though technically this woman is usher to you for 2 separate reasons. In the end of the day, there are 2 psukim. What do you do with the second pasuk? He says, I need it ishus la'avicha ba, because it tells me this following drasha. This is why the Gemara is bringing it in here. We just got through discussing how far of a relationship a goyish a person will have to you. The chiddush over here is that let's say a person sleeps with his sister, who is his sister from a guy, meaning the mother is a guy. Shein ishus la'avicha ba. The father has no ishus with a guy, and therefore the child from that relationship would not be included. And therefore, if you sleep with her, you're not going to be over on any avera of a chaysai. Even at all, meaning there's no avera whatsoever. Meaning, yes, it could be other reasons why it's problematic. So the Gemara says, "Ve'ema prat la'achoso me'anu." So maybe when the Torah says that you can't have ishus in such a woman, it doesn't mean excluding a guy. Meaning, maybe we'll say it's excluding someone who is your sister me'anusa. Why? Because not that they can't have marriage, but they weren't married. Maybe it just means to exclude the case of a regular sister, not a guy. Gemara says, no, you can't tell me that she's not my sister. Why? The Rava Ramiksi. Rava had a stira. The pasuk says, Ervas bas bincha, oy bas bincha, loy segala, the erva of my daughter's daughter and my son's daughter is an erva. So that means I can't be with my daughter's daughter or my son's daughter Ha bas bina dida, bas bita dida shari. The diak from there would be that my daughter's son and my daughter's daughter would be mutter, right? So again, ervas bas bincha, my son's daughter, or bas bitcha, my daughter's daughter, is an erva. The implication would be that the very next generation below that is mutter, right? Ha bas bina dida, bas bita dida shari. And yet it says, uksiv, ervas isha ubita loy segala es bas bina, that's bas bita. So I have two separate psukim. One is me, my wife's granddaughter is okay, and one other one is telling me my wife's granddaughter is a problem. Okay, tzad. Kan ba'ons and kan b'nesud. It must be talking about where one of them is only mine and not hers, and the other one is talking about where they're both ours. We'll pause here. The Gemara is continuing with Rabbi Yossi, but
You review tomorrow?
a little bit, yeah, a little bit of a quick thing. Okay, so we're
Oh, yeah.
Kanai Nahara, we've caught up more or less. Well, not more or less. We've caught up.
Beautiful.
Tomorrow